Hi, everyone. Today we have a very special guest, Marianne. Marianne is an AI lead at Capgemini, and he's also a public speaker and someone who brings together data science, human behavior, and ethics in a way that's very refreshing. He has spent nearly a decade leading AI teams, working on real world machine learning projects, and speaking around the world about how we can use AI responsibly. If you're just curious about how AI works behind the scenes, this interview will give you practical stories, simple explanations, and insights that anyone can understand. So, welcome, Marianne. How are you doing today?
Hey, Sananja. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining the call, Marianne. To begin with, I would like to talk about AI ethics. What exactly is AI ethics?
So, if you look at any newsfeed or um, publication about this topic, you will see that most companies are very abuzz talking about AI ethics specifically.
Mhm.
But it dodges, and usually we focus on misuse of algorithms, unwanted side effects, bias and discrimination happening
Mhm.
in data and in outcomes that affect human lives. But my issue with this is that it's about AI ethics only, but not about ethics in general, because businesses and organizations in general do not want to talk about their ethics. They just want to talk about tiny tiny compartmentalized parts of it, like AI ethics, or in the last decade, sustainability or inclusivity. But we do not talk about ethics as a whole. Meaning AI ethics, not in theory, but in practice, has now become more of a stick and a lightning rod to deviate attention away from business ethics as a whole, which should not be about models and machine learning models making bad decisions, but about accountability as a whole and who takes what risks. But it's, of course, easier to blame machines for it all because when a human makes a mistake, you blame the machine. And when a machine makes a mistake, you also blame the machine. So, netto, we as humans like to point at AI as an other evil, bad thing that makes bad decisions and is to blame. When in reality, organizations just really want to reduce headcounts and they call it automation so they can brag about implementing AI. But they were going to do reduction of headcounts anyway. So that's a very deviating answer because I'm not talking about AI ethics specifically, but I'm talking about AI ethics being popular because of everything except AI ethics, or it's more about the lack of other types of ethics.
Right, which is very interesting. Um, can you walk us through a real ethical dilemma which you encountered while leading an AI project?
So throughout the years as managing data scientist, by now, back in my day, we called it statistics and machine learning.
Mm-hmm.
I've done everything from burnout analysis, a pay gap, so inequality between pays between males and females, forecasting and analyzing the yields of smallholder farmers in developing nations, large scale policy analysis for countries and how to best feed millions of people. And one of the realest things I've encountered here is that we stop. You're asking about a real AI dilemma, but we stop calling
Yes.
it an ethics dilemma.
Uh-huh.
We stop calling it an AI dilemma the moment it affects people's lives, because then we again just call it statistics or machine learning, or when it's really effective and you're helping make more profit, then you also stop calling it AI because your competitor might get ideas, which means that we have a very direct incentive to not talk about the real dilemmas or the real positive impacts we have because it might affect our competitors or raise questions. Meaning, the real ethical dilemmas we hear about are not the real ones at play. And the real ones I've encountered are usually about humans versus profit. Well, that's an easy one.
Mm-hmm.
Then we like to give the machine. Then we like to blame the machine. Oh no, the machine is choosing profit over humans. When I'm more worried about humans choosing profit over humans, but we'd like to
Yeah.
prefer to blame the machine for this. Um, but the main thing I learned is that we stop calling it AI if it's making a real difference, both in the positive and in the negative sense. Because we do sales pitches and PowerPoints, and then it's AI. And then we start implementing it and we start calling it machine learning and all of that. Then we have to explain it to privacy officers. Then it's and to legal, and then it's just statistics. And then finally, when the auditors come in, they look what's actually running and being implemented. Then it's Excel. At least that's how it used to be. Of course, now we live in the grand large language models age, which means it's no longer just an Excel CSV with some kind of predictive model, but it's just an API call to ChatGPT.
Okay. So while working with an AI team, since you have worked with a lot of AI teams, have you encountered any such thing? And according to you, what should we call it?
Um, for what should we call it? Just call it an ethics dilemma. I don't care if we call if this is about AI, because in a few years we'll just call it something else. This is about affecting human lives, and we are derailing the conversation about ethics in human lives because we keep talking about the technology. And
Right.
a lot of us, companies, organizations, but also just people and individuals, would rather talk about and solve a proxy problem like, oh no, there's pollution over here. Let's use satellite footage and machine learning and image recognition to assess the size of the problem of like deforestation or ocean pollution, which are very real problems. But we are not solving the problem by merely measuring it. That's just solving a proxy problem. But we would rather solve a proxy problem and pretend to have done something by just running a model and wasting some cloud credits rather than actually solving it.
Right.
Which does not mean the technology is bad. On the opposite, it's very important that we measure and accurately understand problems our world is facing, everything from global pollution to famines,
Mm.
But merely measuring these problems does not solve them. And we focus so much on that tiny part of the bigger solution because we do not want to talk about bigger solutions. Meaning I
Right.
get to be at the forefront of all the solutions and then say, actually, it's not bad, it's worse. And then see that we're just stuck at the saying how bad it is problem state. Davos is happening right now. We have a lot of fancy talks about very big problems, but it's more about assessing the size of the problem rather than actually seeking solutions. And some of the people, and if you have an incentive to not actually solve a thing because you're making money out of it or something, then the best way to distract from that is by focusing on either measuring it or solving a proxy problem version of
Mm.
it.
Right. It's an interesting insight. Have never thought about it that way. Okay. And also, people talk about AI hallucinations. Why
Mm-hmm.
does that happen? So, everyone, on LinkedIn, everyone talks about hallucinations, hallucinations. There are so many posts that I read almost every single day. So, why does it happen?
Okay, so AI hallucinations is specifically to generative AI, the ChatGPT models that answer words, generate pictures or videos or audio that sounds like people you know. The problem stems from something very simple. It's a dice roll.
Mm.
All of these models gamble and guess what answers you want to hear, what words you want to see, what pictures you want it to generate, and it rolls the equivalent of dice to gamble what you want to get back, because you give input, gives output.
Mm-hmm.
These models do not evidently know what they're saying. They're just imitating voices. They're just imitating text and imitating a new Harry Potter novel that you're talking about. And they're way better at guessing and gambling than we as humans are. Because, hey, these models are trained on all of the internet and a substantial part of Reddit. And we'll be able to write that thesis way better than you. But they are, end of the day, rolling dice and gambling what you want to see. And you cannot eliminate that. You can only minimize it, because this is about uncertainty and what type of risks we find acceptable. In the same way that humans also do not know anything 100%, 99% at max, and will make mistakes. But if a human makes a mistake, we can, fire him or whatever, or blame the machine. But if a machine makes the mistake, they won't defend themselves. So the problem of hallucination, AI hallucination, and this is something there's a lot of things we can do to minimize it. Guard railing, having other master models or observer models check outputs, or just tunnel vision your model. Remember a few years ago when images generated would have 6 or 4 fingers? You don't see that anymore, because we overfitted all these models to always generate 5 fingers, which means we have not solved the problem of too many fingers, because now you cannot generate pictures with 4 fingers, but we've minimized the problem. In the same way you would optimize your beer sales forecast or your weather forecast. And it will never be 100% correct, but it's enough to go by on a daily basis, and you plan accordingly in case it goes wrong. In the same way you plan accordingly when humans do things wrong. But my main point here is that it remains a dice roll end of the day, and you cannot eliminate AI hallucination, only minimize it. I think it is IBM who said in 1979, a computer can never be held accountable. Therefore, a computer must never make a management decision. End of the day, all the decisions we make based on these models are still human decisions, and we need to have accountability in place and figure out what uncertainty is acceptable, rather than saying, oh no, this tech might be wrong sometime, we need to eliminate it. Because you can never eliminate the dice roll rolling on a bad number. You can only try to minimize it. And I would know this because I've played Dungeons and Dragons extensively.
That's such a nice way of expressing it, because you're absolutely right. There is, I think we can never fully eliminate it. Even ChatGPT says that, it's not responsible for whatever it gives answers to us. So, because ultimately it's human who has developed these AI tools.
But we do not want to talk about that. So instead we talk about AI hallucinations and why that's bad. Again,
Yeah.
I'm worried about humans, because these models are trained on human behavior and human data. And I know humans. I studied humans. My background is social science. And I'm very worried about humans.
Yeah. So if a business wants to use AI responsibly, what's the checklist that they should have? What would you recommend?
Like, I'm of course obliged here to refer to the Capgemini ethics framework, which you can Google. But that also brings me to the real answer. You can just Google this, and you can just ask ChatGPT this, and then rewrite and rephrase that framework in whatever language and form you would like. And whatever answer I give you right now, in a few months, it will likely be outdated, because there will be a new type of ethics problem and a new type of framework to deal with it. And me, as a data scientist and as a professional, I'm very lucky that I can Google this and that I can ask this to ChatGPT, not to blindly trust their answers. Heck no, because these are models and they can be have flawed answers too. But I have the privilege to be able to ask these models and to get information from the internet, which 20, 30 years ago, we were not able to. Back then, we needed to read entire books and learn, memorize them and know which page on which shelf of which library to find pieces of information. Nowadays, I can just enter a search query in DuckDuckGo or whatever and get the answer and the information I know, more or less. Is that always 100% correct? Is Google always 100% correct? Hell no. But it made me so much more efficient and so much faster in the things that I do as a professional that I can't even imagine working without it. Sanjana, how many times a day do you use Google?
A lot. So nowadays I use ChatGPT more than I use Google.
See, that's a transformation, but the real distinction is not about do we use DuckDuckGo or Gemini or whatever, but the fact that we have this option. And as professionals a few decades ago, we did not have that option. And that really transformed all our work and our lives. And that's the type of transformation that I want, that we should be talking about, because that's what Gen AI is delivering to us, to our society, not just weird, funny videos or more criminal schemes or skimpily clad God knows what on social media. It's transforming the way we work and the way we live our lives. And that's actually really cool. And we just take that for granted instead of being thankful that we have this, that
No, that
nobody
is
else
so
throughout
true.
history
Yeah.
had.
I think just a few years ago, we did not have anything like this before. So we are really privileged. So I'm going to ask you, how has the field of machine learning changed in the past 10 years?
I've made this joke before. I'm sorry. A decade ago, I was graduating, and we were doing statistics. Then I got my first job, and they said, "Wow, that's data science," and I said yes because I needed a damn job. This is how I became a data scientist. Then it all became machine learning. Then I was an AI expert because I built two machine learning systems, and one worked. And now everything is Gen AI, but for some reason we stopped calling normal AI. Now it all has to be large language models and Gen AI. But that brings me back to Larry Tesler, also from the 70s, one of the fathers of modern computing, who said, AI is whatever machines haven't done yet. Because in a few years after we implement it, we stop thinking it's cool and new. This brings me back to Google, because 20, 30 years ago, search engines were the pinnacle of AI research.
Yeah.
Then Google entered our lives, and it's in everybody's phone and everybody can use it. And now we do not consider Google to be cool AI stuff anymore, because we consider it normal, because every damn human can use it. This is why Google is the most successful piece of AI technology in human history, because it is freely available to all, and it changed all our lives in terms of information access, digestion, education, everything. And we don't even realize it. The real impact is not when it's cool and when it's on the LinkedIn buzz feeds, but when it's changing the way normal humans behave in their everyday lives. But as a side effect of Google's success as an AI in the early 2000s, we now consider it normal. We don't even call it a search engine anymore. We call it Googling. This is why Netflix is probably the second most successful piece of AI tech in human history, because we call it Netflixing. It got its own damn word. And a few years from now, yeah, okay, well, we'll call everything ChatGPT, I fear. But a decade ago, deep learning was all the craze. That happened in 2012, 13, when I was studying. And we realized that, hey, these machine learning models that get better if you add more computing power. What if you use video game NVIDIA Atlas GPUs to make better models? The only reason the NVIDIA GPU exists is because video games. So yes, I have video games to thank for my field I wouldn't have this job if not for video games. You hear me, Dad? So a decade ago, we were scaling neural nets
Mm-hmm.
with better compute, and we got deep learning out of that. A few
Mm-hmm.
years before that, we were focusing on big data, just having big distributed sources of data that could not exist on any single server. It was too big for a single server, so you needed clusters. Nowadays, we're barely ever talking about big data because our servers now are so much better than what we had a decade ago. Now you can fit all that big data on a single computer. So big data is dead, long live big data. Similarly, the deep learning craze has become normal and a standardized part of everyday lives and is used in most forms of data analytics and forecasting these days. We also stopped thinking that is cool and we stopped calling that AI. A decade ago, Andrew NG figured out that this is a dog, this is a cat model, also 2012, 13. Man, I sound old now. Nowadays, do we think it's cool and AI if a model can tell this is a dog and this is a cat? Hell no, because it's in every self-driving car, it's in all your social media apps, and it's in every autonomous killer drone that's currently flying at the front lines in Ukraine. Because a model invented a decade ago is now an everyday part of our lives, which in a ridiculous way is the real impact when you can use it everywhere. It's also the scary part because we don't talk about this. Because we prefer the buzzwords and oh we did an IPO and we sold stuff. But the real scary thing is that all this tech that we considered new a decade ago is standard nowadays. Yet most people still really don't get it. So in response to your question, how did the field of machine learning change over the last decade? Well, we went from big data to deep learning to image recognition and audio recognition to transformers in the last few years, and
Yeah.
because of that, we got ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
We already had transformers for a few years before that. I was playing AI Dungeon in 2021 and 2022, which was a Dungeons and Dragons model, by the way, before you get weird ideas, which was also from OpenAI. But it really changed the moment ChatGPT became good enough and easy enough to use. And because OpenAI just gave it freely available to all, didn't launch, oh, this is the era of Gen AI we're starting, but they just gave everybody open access to ChatGPT. You can ask questions, it can be wrong. But because of that, millions started using it and they got the data and the feedback to further improve it in ways they never would have had they charged money for it right from the start. And this is why ChatGPT did the Google thing. Hey, we make it freely, openly available to everybody and we will profit from the data that most companies to this day still have not figured out. So the biggest answer is that we've seen data profit models come up over the last decade.
Yeah, this shows that data is the most important thing where the company should actually invest, which we underestimate so much, the data and the scale of
And
any business.
most problems in the field also stem from lack of data quantity and especially lack of data quality. Actually, it's getting worse now because we live in a post-GPT era.
Yeah.
Where most of the internet stuff on the internet is actually being generated by bots and AI models talking to other bots and AI models. There's more conversation happening on social media platforms between bots than between humans, meaning that the training data that we need to improve these models is now being heavily contaminated by machines and AI. And the only real quality data we had was until 22, 23, when the internet was still mostly human. And now we train improved models, but it's more and more polluted by model generated nonsense training to being used to train the next model full of nonsense. And this is actually a very big crisis we're in right now because nonsensical AI bullshit can be generated way faster and way more at scale than human interactions. Meaning, as the proportion of AI generated content scales faster than human content, well, the proportion of quality data actually becomes smaller. Because compared to the generated content, which is growing way faster, we will have proportionally less and less good quality training data from humans on the internet.
So that's a big downside that we have of AI.
That's one we have to deal with, because it's only going to get worse from here.
Okay, yeah, I think each and everything has its own pros and cons. So this is the con that we'll have to deal with.
Of course.
So we have all witnessed the evolution of ML from classical models to deep learning to Gen AI. Looking back, what do you think was the most misunderstood shift?
Well, we just talked about it. Data quality cannot be bypassed. But maybe it happened 20 years ago when we had the digital shift, when 20 to 30 years ago, when companies started shifting all their paperwork processes to digital processes. And many companies think they did that, but they did it inefficiently in sparse different IT systems that are not integrated well, and you can't find anything on your SharePoint, and it's all Excel on the back end. Because it didn't do the full digital transition, a decade later, 10 years ago, they couldn't start the data-driven transition where you stop doing everything based on rules and start using and leveraging all the data in your company to make more effective analysis and decisions. Because, hey, if you haven't digitized everything, then you won't have the data to make that transition. And because of that transition being incomplete for most companies, nowadays we see that they can't do their AI transformation transition because, hey, they lack the data at scale, good quality and easily available data to do any of that. And then they want to build their own company GPT based on what data? Yeah, we have some documents in a really badly maintained SharePoint. So AI doesn't. There's a lot of talk about AI replacing classic infrastructure, but AI exposes the absence of classic infrastructure, your absence of quality data, and your absence of having digitized your processes in your companies. So really, this is why I learned to do statistics and machine learning, to model human behavior. And to this day, now we call it AI, my greatest joy is seeing that AI helps highlight what is human. It helps us better understand ourselves, just often in a very negative way, by highlighting problems, mistakes, and well, most of my career, and if you check my feed, is focused on terrible things. I analyze famine, refugees, killer drones, disinformation that affects millions, our democracy, our society. But that's also where I want to be, because that's where I can make the biggest difference for human lives, by helping fight hunger, by helping fight disinformation, by helping people make healthier decisions, by helping protect our free world. And there, with AI and tech, I can make a bigger difference for human lives than I ever would if I were just applying that same AI and tech to increase profit margins for a bank.
What you're doing is really inspiring. I think not many people I know are doing what you are doing, especially for talking about human behavior in terms of AI. So yeah, that's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So we have already talked about the past decade. Now let's go into the future. What do you think will fade away in the coming 5 years, which are so hyped right now?
I hope that we will get rid of the magical thinking, because magical thinking, Slavoj Žižek and others philosophers wrote about this, is when you do not know how to solve a problem, so you just start believing in some kind of magic, which can be a technology, in this case AI, or a political movement, or a political leader with a funny mustache, and he'll solve all the problems. Magical thinking is that you disregard logic and you have a problem and you just believe that this one thing will solve that problem, but you don't know how. Many organizations approach AI projects exactly like that. They have a problem or a perceived problem. They have no clue how to solve it. They just hope AI will be able to solve it because nothing else could. And then here we come in, AI people, and we have to solve this problem that they don't even understand. Because if they understood the problem, they would have solved it without us, and they would have solved it without AI. So it's a pretty shitty job when you think about it that way. But again, this is human behavior. This is not about AI. This is the problem of magical thinking, of that we do not want to understand problems. We just want somebody to promise us to make all the problems go away. 2014, Brexit. British were told that all their problems as a country would go away if they were to just leave the EU. They didn't. They left the EU, and all the problems became worse. Economy went down the drain, and by most objective measures and most scientific standards nowadays, we can safely conclude that was a very big mistake. But that's not because they thought and calculated carefully how exactly Brexit would improve their situation. It's just because magical thinking. They thought if we do this one thing, it will make all the problems go away. Around the same time, we were believing that blockchain would make all our problems go away. Around the same time, I was studying disinformation and AI-generated disinformation, which also heavily affected Brexit at the time. It's one of the most successful disinformation operations in human history. But why am I referring to this? Because, again, magical thinking is a human problem, not just an AI problem. And in a few years, companies will stop. Hey, can we just implement an AI for this? But I would rather they focus on understanding the problem. Is it data quality? Is it data quantity? Can you not accurately forecast this? Do you have no clue what your actual employees are doing? Are you losing too many clients or people or lives on this? Because then we can talk technology. Okay, what is it? Is this a knowledge graph issue? Is this a time series forecasting issue? Can we improve the quality of your image recognition of bananas? Because some companies that that transport bananas, they need image recognitions to count how many bananas are there in a truck, or how many cows there are in the field. And I know a guy who just models cows for a living, and it's really interesting, but it's very niche. And my hope for the next 5 years is that we stop talking magical thinking technology will solve this and talk about the problems, because then we tech people can come in to help find a solution and solve it, rather than doing blanket solutions like, okay, everything AI or everything cloud will solve all your problems. Just get Azure, or just get AWS, or just get Google. Hey, I've worked with all three, and I'm a big fan of their products. Don't get me wrong, but you cannot solve every problem by just migrating to a cloud. In the Netherlands, we have this toilet duck brand, like little toilet duckies you hang in the toilet for fresh air, and they have this slogan: "We from Toilet Duck advise Toilet Duck." Of course, that's your product. So if you only have a hammer, then you only see nails. I hope that we tech people, we stop seeing cloud as the solution to everything just because we're cloud people, and we stop seeing image recognition as the solution to everything, because that's what we do. That you don't need a sensor and IoT for every damn problem, but that we focus on problems and then match that with the solution. Because right now we are sort of solution oriented, and we want this solution, magical thinking, to solve all the problems. And that doesn't happen. Sometimes AI is not the solution. Sometimes linear regression will do, because you need your model to be fully explainable and transparent. under EU legislation, you have to have transparent and explainable models nowadays. So out with the deep learning and in with the random forest, you know? And that in the end is our job as data professionals, to mix and match and figure out what solution you need to solve this problem, what models, what technology, what type of databases, what type of forecasts, what type of complexity of models, and what type of large language model, and in which country should the server be running so your data is private. But those are complex problems requiring complex solutions, which are just hard sells to people who want simple solutions to everything, which in the end is lazy. So maybe I just hope that over the next 5 years we stop being lazy, because it's going to cost a lot of companies and a lot of organizations a lot of money if they keep on being lazy, because the competitors won't. And well, that's for private companies, then you just lose money. But we also have governments here, defense, national security. If you're lazy about adopting this stuff in that field, that's going to cost you human lives in the long term, which is scary, but that is also how we should be treating this. This is not just a profit model. Technology adoption, digitization, going data driven, and leveraging AI are strategic goals, not to brag about on your LinkedIn feeds, but to implement, to keep your companies and your people and your organizations and your country safe. And you'll find that those most successful at this will be the ones who stop talking about it. Meaning the loudmouths who scream AI every day are actually doing AI the least.
That's an interesting perspective, I think. We all are very much dependent on AI these days. That's why you're talking about magical thinking, to think. I think sometimes we don't look at the easier solutions, the traditional way of thinking. So, one last, oh, sorry, you were saying something.
And I also hope that we stop believing everything we see on the internet, because thanks to modern deepfakes and AI, it is more easier than ever before to generate videos, full on HD images of real people doing very weird things. And
Deep videos.
there is no amount of technology that we can use to distinguish real from fake here, because the most cutting edge fakes will always be ahead of the most cutting edge detection models of fakes. And because of that, the only real way to figure that out is to be on your guard and to stop believing single data points. Because if this if your friend of yours or this politician or a company CEO is saying weird stuff in this video, triangulate, check with other data sources. Did they also say that in the news? Was it published elsewhere? Do other people say that as well? Because people can arrive independently at the same truth, but cannot arrive independently at the same lie. And it's that macro level thinking about the information that we consume that we should learn far more, because believing single data points will become more dangerous than ever, because they can be faked more easily than ever, because we live in the information age, not the knowledge age. Actual knowledge, by comparison, is more scarce than ever.
That's so true. It's so difficult to distinguish between what is real and what is fake, because some people will be like, no, that's an AI generated video, and some will be like, no, that's a real video. So there's no way to find out actually what's real and what's not.
And there are ways to find out, which is fact checking, double checking. Do other sources correspond? Do they say something different? But we can no longer rely on single sources, which we never should in the first place. But it's just becoming relatively more dangerous these days.
Yeah. One last question to you is, have you ever seen a similar hype cycle before in AI or ML?
Funny question that, because we saw the same with the rise of big data.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw the rise of deep learning, and we thought the market is, both times we thought the market is now way too hot. We're over promising AI too much.
Mm-hmm.
And we expect another AI winter, like in the 60s and in the 80s, we had AI winters where promises were too overblown and they couldn't deliver with expert systems and with primitive first search engines, but they couldn't deliver in the short term. And then funding got cut and the whole market went pop because it was a bubble. We are right now in another bubble. But rather than seeing the bubble pop like the dot-com bubble after deep learning, instead it kept on inflating thanks to transformer models and large language models.
Yeah.
So I think we're still in that hype. It just keeps on blowing up, and companies like OpenAI are not going to run a profit. They a few years ago they were promising. Sam Altman was promising generic AI.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they're now adding ads and contemplating adding 18 plus versions of ChatGPT just to make some money. We shouldn't believe all the promises in the short term, but we should look at the trend in the mid long term, because GPT is changing the ways we work, we run companies, we run businesses, changing all our lives. Also blowing up all our Instagram feeds, unfortunately. But all these overblown promises by companies in the short term, there's just no way they're going to be able to deliver. Car prices, phone prices, laptops, all these things that we need, all these prices are going up on all types of tech because we need all the transistors to build more data parks, to run bigger models. That's going to stop. That's going to flatline at some point. Maybe it will, maybe it will converge and overlap with a potential invasion of Greenland or something, because there's going to be some big event in our near future that will disrupt trade, international trade. And the moment international trade is disrupted and all these transistors can't come from Taiwan to the rest of the world, the growth stops. We know we're in a bubble, but that is why we should focus on real tech, real problems, and real solutions, rather than fundraising for another AI startup that is really just an API call to ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Um, yeah, I think so. With that, you have answered all my questions. Thank you so much, Marianne, for joining the call and for sharing such thoughtful insights on machine learning ethics and how the AI landscape has evolved over the years. So, thank you so much, Marianne. It was wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for having me. And let's focus on tech changing people's lives rather than just changing the content of internet feeds. Thank you all. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.